Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Ryan Trainor. With a remarkable 3-decade entrepreneurial journey, Ryan has lived the full spectrum of business, the exhilarating highs of success marked by major exits and accolades, and the humbling lows that inevitably happen along the journey. But in 2022, everything changed. After years of relentless pursuit, success came at a heavy cost: exhaustion, anxiety, and burnout. The wake-up call wasn't just from the doctors, but his youngest daughter, who was quite concerned. And this forced Ryan to stop and reflect and reconsider everything: his health, his priorities, and the very constructs that have defined his life and his work. What followed was a transformative journey, a complete recalibration. Ryan began to redefine success, placing well-being, authentic leadership, and meaningful connection at the core of everything he does. Recognized as Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Ryan's focus now extends beyond business success. It's about health, balance, and thoughtful leadership, themes he explores on his podcast, Trainable by Ryan Trainor. Now, Ryan and I first met when I was invited onto Trainable with my dad, Rod, which was, feels like maybe 2 years ago now. Wow, that's insane. So I'm really excited to be on the other side of the mic today. And without any further delay, let's kick it off. Ryan, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you?
Fantastic, Ash. It's great to be here, and it's great to have Frankie on my lap as well. I think I've made a new friend here.
He looks very comfortable, and I don't think he's going to be moving for the entirety of this interview. So I hope that's okay.
He's a comfort dog.
He is. He's like a little bit of a therapy dog. Yeah. I think it's strategic. I get him on people's laps. Exactly. They open up more. Yeah.
I can see the ploy.
Oh my goodness. Well, as I said, I'm so excited to kick off this interview and to have this conversation today. So to allow our audience to get to know you a little bit better, Ryan, can we start with, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Yeah, it's a great question. I live just around the corner.
Which we just discovered, which is brilliant.
Just in Bayside in Melbourne. I grew up in Eltham, so about 40 minutes outside of Melbourne. And my days have shifted a lot. We'll talk about that today, but 2 years ago I kind of stepped away from more operational roles. So now I kind of realistically do unashamedly what I love to do within my business world, which we'll chat about today. And then I've got the Non-Negotiables, and we live in an amazing suburb. I feel very privileged to be able to be here. So I've got my morning routine. So I'm, as my dad used to say, and I always thought, God, Dad, what are you saying? And, when you're a teenager, but you used to say, like, win the morning, win the day. And
so
and it's like,
true.
and now I'm saying that to my kids, and they're probably looking at me going, eye rolling me. But I definitely win the morning and win the day, up early, take advantage of everything, go to Greenpoint every morning to do my meditation.
Oh, beautiful.
And then start the day. But it's terrific. And for fun, I've got 3 beautiful daughters, love my family, travel. But I think it's probably reading and discovering and meeting different people. So I'm just probably going through a stage of just a lot of curiosity. So anything that can kind of scratch that itch, I'm into at the moment.
It's one of the things I noticed about you when we first met, and I think it forms such a beautiful base for your podcast, is that real sense of curiosity and the desire to learn that you seem to have. Is that something that you've always had since a child, or has that come about more recently?
Yeah, Mum always said I was a man in a hurry, and I don't know. I just think, and that's why I've been with Rach, my wife, now for about 31 years, and it's a similar value we both have. It's almost like a bit of a wanderlust, and I am genuinely curious into things, and I think based on that, you learn so much, and I think for me, it's been probably one of the core values in my life that's maybe allowed me to achieve some of the things I've achieved at certain stages. And I don't think that ever stops, and I think it's with every single person you meet. Everyone's got a story, right? And if you kind of do believe that, maybe we're all connected in one specific way, it's amazing how people can, when you're talking to people at certain times, you're hearing things you needed to hear, and maybe when you're chatting to people as well with that curiosity, you could be providing people what they might need to hear at that moment. So it's a nice way to live, I think.
It really, to me, solidifies the importance of connection as well.
Yep.
Because, I think today we live in a more isolated world than ever before. A lot of the time we're working from home. We may go entire days without really connecting with others, and we're missing that. It's often, I talk about, with my spiritual connection and my connection with God, that God speaks through people.
Yep.
And sometimes it'll be conversations that, maybe something that you're going to say today that I needed to hear that will land. And yet when we're so disconnected from our fellows, from our community at large, we're missing the opportunity to have that growth, that learning, and that connection.
It's so true. And it's a mindset, isn't it? Like if you think about going into every day as it's like an adventure somewhat, and you just pay a bit more attention to those days. And I think, one of the challenges I've had, and being maybe more A-type kind of growing up with all of this was that, you sometimes overemphasize free will in a way, which I do believe that life is about the choices that you make. But, I use lots of analogies and a lot of them are terrible, and probably golf isn't a good one, and I'm not even a golfer, but it's a bit like also sometimes in life, like if you're playing golf, for example, and you've got the grip, you can over grip it, right? Because you're trying to control it more. And I think, as you kind of go through life a little bit and you had a little bit more experience, I think that for my life, a lot of it has been over gripping, trying to control too much of it. But I think now I kind of realize a little bit is that you got to loosen the grip sometimes. It doesn't mean you still have a lack of choice in all of it, but you kind of have a lot more trust in life, and there's a lot more ease that can come with that. And I think if you've got that little bit more trust, then each day you kind of, it unfolds in a different way for you, and you can be a little bit more of an observer in that curiosity versus thinking that you have to grip and drive everything every day. And sometimes that is actually counterintuitive to actually progressing in life, I've found anyway. That's been my experience.
It's so similar in the world of recovery, which, is the space that is the space I live in a lot of the day. And there's this idea that with faith, we allow ourselves to let go of control, because so many of us are moving around life riddled with fear, and it might be conscious or it might be subconscious, but fear underpins a lot of the decisions that we make. And when we're making decisions based from fear, it's small-minded, it's narrow-minded. It's like, let's keep everything within our control, because if I let go of control, what's going to happen? And the antidote to fear is faith. So the more you can lean into having a faith, believing that everything is going to work out just as it needs to, then it's much easier to start to open yourself up to the possibility. And I know for me, even just reflecting on the last 5 years, that, when I was controlling and managing my life, I was living in a city that I didn't want to be in, married to a man that I didn't want to be married to, doing a job that I didn't want to do, all because of fear. And then all of a sudden you let go and you go, all right, universe, I'm handing it over. Like, show me the way forward. All of a sudden you start to live a life that feels aligned.
So true.
And you just get to move into the flow of things. It's so much nicer.
It is. And if you think about what fear is or what worry is, it's often a debt or that you may not have to pay, because we're kind of future forecasting what something will actually be. And then if you kind of start thinking about it, and I've had to do a lot of work on this myself, and so for an analogy, I've just got the runners on and I haven't even left the house to run the marathon at the moment. But I feel like for where I'm at the moment is that if those thoughts are in your mind, and really our thoughts really render our experience in life, right? So, and you can kind of think about that, like if you go to a cafe and you said one thing to 10 different people in that cafe, each of them will render a different experience based on their life, what they've read that day, their life experiences, a number of things. So then when you start kind of thinking about fear, it's like you're forecasting something that may or may never happen, but actually that can be self-realizing in its sense as well, because your thoughts will render the experiences that you have, even not physically, but how you're viewing the future as well. So it's an interesting kind of thing. It's when you really see how fascinating it is and how much you choose to experience your life through what thoughts you have. Fear can start to move away just a little bit, but it's just how what's that framework that you start creating for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Such a good point. All right, Ryan, I've asked you to bring in a photo today.
Yep.
Now, this photo is from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself to everyone around you, but the truth was internally you were really struggling.
Yep.
Can I please ask you to describe for our audience the photo that is going to come up on the screen now, describing what are we looking at here, and also what is actually going on for you at that time in your life?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's me presenting when I was CEO of a large company, and it was, it's almost like I was a caricature of myself, right? Like it's kind of you. I was thinking about it on the way here as well, Ash. It was like I was like an NPC, like I was a non-playing character in my own life, like I was living up to some caricature of what an entrepreneur is, and the energy just wasn't pulling me there, but I was still acting that part, in the way that I was behaving, the image that I was providing, and it was just not who I was at that stage of my life. And it wasn't that I didn't love the business or what I was in. It was just that I had kind of got myself into a stage where that kind of role, the responsibility, even what I was doing just wasn't serving me anymore, and it wasn't serving others as well. But I was continuing to be that actor, and it was almost like I was observing myself, and it's almost like it was a 3-4 year gap in my life, which almost time and space just went so quickly. And I look back at it and I look at that picture, and as though I'm still proud of it, I still had integrity and values, but it was me going completely against the vibration of where I needed to be or what I was supposed to be doing. But I was kind of doing it for all the reasons I thought that was right, but it wasn't actually doing the right thing by myself or for others.
Okay, I have two questions here. What in your mind did you believe was quote unquote right at the time? And what was the cost to you mentally, spiritually, physically?
Yeah, I think, when you start, I'm 51, right? And if you think about our lives, it's a bit like I think of sometimes another poor analogy is like a mobile phone, right? We download specific software, which is like our operating system, right? In how we see things. And I think, through my childhood and growing up, you kind of download specific things in how you render your experience. And part of it was like, I hate letting people down, right? To a point where I will do myself and family, like it's so ridiculous, right? So I've got this kind of sense that, I'm doing it for others, but it was really somewhat of a story I was creating, really. It was a narrative that I was kind of creating for myself. So there I was, thinking through that I was, being stoic and doing it for others.
When you say others,
I had different people that were invested in the business, which is I take all that responsibility on, but even just like family members and different people that was involved, that I got involved, and it was, emotion and logic had collided for me a little bit, and I've been running hard for a very, very long time, and it was almost like, being a farmer, I was just harvesting for a very long time, but I didn't take time to clean the bloody machinery and sow any more seeds. So I kind of got myself into a state physically where I was, vomiting in the morning, just with anxiety, and also just, just not showing up as I should have probably at home at certain stages. And so, and then, and what else was there? It was just like, I'm pretty active, and then I was not being able to even get physical activity, which spirals you out of it because that's what you need. But look at it, it was just, the world was trying to tell me something, and I just wasn't listening. And as they say, sometimes it's a little bit of a little kind of tickle under the chin, and then you don't listen, and then it's a little slap, and then you get the bloody chair across the face.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it is no one else's that was nothing to do with anybody else. I still actually have some guilt that sits with that a little bit, and I had got myself into that position, and it was only me that got myself in that position, nobody else. And but saying all of it, then you need to kind of make choices and kind of reflect upon it. And I feel like 2 years out of that now, that doesn't define me. It was just it's the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
And then you think about that, like there's always that moment, which is that moment where you kind of that ordeal, right? And then you move through the ordeal, and then you need to be broken sometimes to be rebuilt. Yes. And then you kind of go through that kind of the resurrection of yourself, so to speak, and then then you kind of come out that as the new person, and and then you find yourself thinking, okay, well, I think that the honesty for yourself and the happiness that sits in it is the dissonance between who you are and who you project to be. And if you come out of it and that gap's a lot smaller, I think then you're in the right spot, but you got to keep yourself accountable.
Can we talk about little Ryan for a moment?
Yeah.
Because in my time, and I've spent a lot of time with very successful people, particularly when I was also working in the corporate industry, and I have found that a common thread, it's not always, but a common thread with people who are highly successful is that something happened throughout their childhood where they decided that they needed to be great for external validation and to feel like they were allowed to take up space in the world. And you mentioned before that, for as long as you can remember, you felt a sense of responsibility. I'm really curious, is there a time in your life where you can pinpoint that maladaptive coping mechanism, like when that was born? Or do you feel like it was just something that you were born with?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and like going and doing a bit of work around all of that stuff. I think, I don't know if this sounds crazy, but I've always had a lot of self-belief even when I was young, and I've got two amazing parents. Dad's passed away, Mum's still there, and it was a crazy childhood in some ways because Mum and Dad separated when I was 14, and they weren't happy, right, at all. And there was a fair bit of conflict in the house, and I think I'd consider myself a pretty highly sensitive person. So like, if shit was going down in the house, I could feel it as I was walking in the door. But that's actually become a superpower now because I can kind of move into meetings and I can generally get a really good sense of the room. So it's actually served me. But at that stage now is that if I'm in a cafe sometimes and people are like, there's some tension there, I often even have to move away.
Wow.
So it's kind of, but it's not in a sixth sense, mystical way, but I just really feel it. So I think that sensitivity has served me and not served me. And I think I've been a good leader and a visionary, but sometimes a terrible manager because of that skill at specific stages. But then if you're kind of looking back as a kid, through all of it, I think, there's this little thing about me is like, I don't know, not going to university, moving into different groups of society. Like I've probably deep down maybe wanted to prove something, to be honest. And I think the underlying part of that is maybe relevance, is trying to be relevant. And I think that if you dig deep into these types of things around ego and relevance, like it's not all bad.
No, of course not.
So if you it's a survival mechanism. If we're getting a bit deeper, if life's potentially about survival and procreation potentially as a species, right?
It is.
Some of the things that sit within us have been these survival kind of mechanisms for ourselves, so that sometimes, but they just get out of whack now. Like ego's been how many likes you get on Instagram, you know what I mean? So we can kind of go the wrong way. But my point of it is that I think relevance has helped because I want to impact the world in specific ways, and relevance will help me do that. But it then doesn't serve you well as well when you're doing it for the wrong reason. So I think I've had that struggle throughout my career. I think is around Relevance, and I think, that period for me about being the caricature of the entrepreneur moved away from the reason why I want relevance, and maybe moved into a different realm. So I think childhood plays a big part of it, but I loved sport. I've always been super competitive. I was that little yap kid on the sports field. I grew up in markets with mum and dad since from 6 to 18, getting up early, and my mum and dad loved me a lot. But I think, there's probably different events that happen that help shape me, but that's shit happens.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even the mere fact that I know it's so common, but I think it's really important to not, just because something is common doesn't mean it still doesn't have a deep impact. And the fact that you had your parents separate at 14, which is such a fundamental time in your development as a young man, would have been huge. And as you said, living in a household where there was that conflict, it might not have been overt, it might have been covert. I know with my mum and dad, a lot of it wasn't, I was chatting to someone earlier today about this, it wasn't so much the drinking or the fighting, it was the next day when there was that tension in the house because there'd been a blow up the night before, and you would just walk on eggshells. All of that, I believe, adapts the way that we start to move through life. And I loved how you described that ability to read a room. I feel like I'm really similar. And part of that is, almost a hypervigilance.
Yes.
But to your point, you can turn that into a superpower.
Spot on. And that's why I think I blew myself up as well. Like you like I was saying, I care about others. So you're highly sensitive, you're worrying about everybody, and you just get to a point where, the other thing is that you remember is that Rach, my wife's fantastic, and she says to me, Ryan, you'll be really disappointed about how much other people are really thinking about you. Well, at that time, I'm like, yeah, thanks. You know what I mean?
Love her.
And I'm
so
like,
true.
and she says it so gently, and it's kind of like, but it's still pointed, right? And it's true is that we still build up all these stories around stuff. And I remember when I exited one of my companies, I was like, oh my God, the chosen ones left the building and all that bullshit, right? And then life just went straight on. Like, oh, who was he? Oh, who was that guy on the wall there for a little bit of time? Yes. So we build all these stories around all of it that often aren't true as well. So I think that's the thing that you kind of, as you get a little bit older, is that, the meaning of life is the meaning that you give each of these moments, right? So everything's neutral, and it's just a canvas, and what meaning am I going to give it? And half of it's just constructs and stories.
Absolutely. And we get to choose. It's even whether to choose whether to be happy or sad, whether to live with gratitude or to be negative. It's all a decision at the end of the day. And of course, we all come from different backgrounds and we have different adverse experiences, but I really want to empower anyone that's listening today to know that they have a choice.
I had I don't care if people judge me on this or not, but so I started responsibly with support with psychedelics.
Right.
And one of these amazing experiences that I had, and I'm not advocating that people do it, but it served me, right, on my journey and my experimental one. And this one experience I had was this deep realization that every relationship in my life is nothing to do with any other person. And it's all just to do with me. And I know that everyone's probably listening going, yeah, come. No, I learned that when I was early, right? And I'm like, but I was like, well, because again, based on it's my experiences in life will determine, if someone says something to me, they could say it to 10 different people in the room, like I said it before. But because of my experiences, I'm like, I might have some insecurities or whatever. And it was just this really defining moment for me. And I just looked at everyone in my life and I was like, nothing to do with them anymore. It's like, how am I in this relationship or in this partnership or with each and every important person in my life? And I still get it wrong, but I've just taken ultimate responsibility in how I render that experience now. And it's just taken such a load off me. It's like no one else's responsibility now. It doesn't mean I don't get pissed off and I still fall into the traps of it, but it's a super empowering thing when you kind of realize that. For me, it has been anyway.
We do a similar thing in 12-step recovery when you go through the process of doing the steps, and part of it is when you write your step 4 is to look at every relationship you have in your life where you feel resentment or fear, and you dissect it and you look at the part that you've played. And it's so empowering, because if I, for so many years I moved through life blaming everyone around me for my situations and circumstances, but the whole time I was pointing the finger. I had 3 pointed back at me, all the while thinking it was everyone else's fault. The minute I stopped blaming people and I took responsibility for my actions, because it's the only thing that you can control. You cannot control people, places or things. Yep. The moment I did that, I was empowered, because I started to realize that I could show up and choose the way that I showed up, and that would then impact my relationships on a much deeper level. I have to know, tell me everything. With the psychedelics, what inspired you to go down that path?
Well, the interesting thing here is, and I know after our chat as well, which was amazing and which got so much feedback, Ash, and you and your dad were just unbelievable, is I never did drugs growing up at all, which is because I was really into sports, and for whatever reason, I just missed that part of my life, right? So I still having beers down the Lower Plenty pub or whatever, but I just didn't kind of move through that circle. So I actually went and just started reading a lot, and I started reading actually like back in time, a long way back to, even just Jung, and I've gone back through Egypt and scriptures and a whole range of stuff, right? And there was this kind of, and then I was just, reading books like Rick Rubin's book around creativity and a number of different things, right? And I'm like, oh, it's all interesting. So I got on a plane and I went to Colorado to the Psychedelic Science Conference, and there was 13,000 people there. And I'm like, I'm listening to John Hopkins and all these different things, and I'm even like skeptical of half of those groups anyway. But there was, I just sat there and listened. And I just thought, if I'm going to invest time and effort and thought into it, it wasn't about recreation for me. It was around, is there an opportunity for me to understand myself? I believe life is about the social constructs and constructs that we kind of create around ourselves. And if I was able to push myself beyond the constructs that I see, is there any learnings for me, and is there any opportunity for me to show up better in my life, which was my intent for kind of going through it. So that was been a journey, and something where, it's got to be the right time for yourself. I'm not advocating for it, but for me, it sent me into a different trajectory, particularly even with my meditation now as well. And I would hope my wife and my kids would say that the experience and the framework and how I see the world has made me a better person, which isn't necessarily the psychedelics. It's like the work that I've done past it, and I've been able to maybe open doors in my mind to see things a little bit differently, and it's helped me.
I have a feeling that people listening along, watching along, are going to be curious to know what psychedelics you chose and how that was administered. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah. I'm going to be cancelled now. Who's this dude? It was psilocybin.
Yep.
And it was with a guide, with music, the eye shades, and 5 hours.
Wow.
And I've gone through 3 cycles of that.
Wow. In Australia or overseas?
I'll say overseas.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. That's right. Far away.
Yeah, far away. So, yeah. And again, I don't think it's something I may even need to do ever again. But it was something where I journaled and thought and look. And again, I just look at life as an experiment of one. And it's got to be right for you at that time, and a whole range of things. But it's put me down definitely some rabbit holes in my reading. And my curiosity, and I think it's just part of the journey for me.
That's awesome. I think, talking about this stuff openly is so important. And, you know, you've definitely stressed that you're not advocating for it, but also for some people it is going to be right.
Yeah.
And it's just about providing people with the information to make their own informed decision.
Spot on. And I mean, I started to give some support to Monash University now and some of their clinical trials. And if anyone wants to actually research it, go to Monash. Paul was on my podcast, who's the professor there. And it is, you know, there's some of the stuff that's coming out of that, those clinical trials. It's unbelievable, right? And this is maybe where there is a little bit of advocacy for me, because sometimes you need a shift in your life. You're so stuck, and there's some, you know, some great studies coming out in regards to that. So if you ever want to research it in the right way, go and look at Monash and their psychedelic program. And it's now legalised in Australia as well, with support. So, you know, again, it could be just one option for a person, or it may be something that is completely out of their comfort zone.
And I know for people that have chronic PTSD, depression that is, you know, quote unquote untreatable,
yes,
it can be very powerful.
Oh God, I mean, I've seen the studies on it, and it's, and I think sometimes, okay, so let's dig into that, right? So if everything's just a construct, right, is that everything, you know, if everything around us, rules, life, everything is made up. It's just a social contracts and energy that we give it, you know. And when you start looking at the world that way,
So true.
it's like it's everything's made up, you know. And then you know, and it's a joke. Like I was just thinking the other day, is like, say this house that we're in now, right? Like, just say it was built 30 years ago. Like why is it now worth 5 times the amount? And why does it now take 2 people maybe to support a mortgage here versus 1? And why do we like all these questions? I know that sounds on a bit of a tangent, but everything's just constructs. Like,
yes.
Money's construct.
Yes.
You know, rules are construct.
And we're all
right,
just playing
right,
along.
right, and wrong is basically the duality of life. Like, that's why it frustrates me when, you know, just say you have an opinion and you get othered. You know, like you might say, you know, I agree with this policy in politics, and then you say you're a left, you know, woke, or you might say I think this is right, you're a far right wing, blah blah blah. And it's like there's the polarities of life, like good, bad, everything that we've got is just, it's on like this little lever that you can pull across, and it's all made up. It's all based on your own kind of views of things, and everyone's just so passionate about all these things and outraged all the time at the moment in regards to it, but it's all made up.
Do you think it's because people are just craving some sort of certainty, and therefore when we put a label on something we can understand it easier?
Yeah, I think that we all, you know, my view is that we're all, just think of us like an avatar, right? And we pimp our avatar up, we put some clothes on, you know what I mean? We're now telling telling our world, you know, we're it's our character, right? And then, okay, then what are we going to do? Well, now I believe in this because that is helping define your avatar in the world, right? It's like people are so passionate about that is because everyone is trying to define themselves in the world. And what we attach ourselves to, philosophy, to causes, to what we wear, it's all just characters, right? It's hilarious if we look at each other sometimes. It's like, dude, come on, like, what am I? And so I kind of laugh walking down the street sometimes now. It's like, and so, right, you know, like, look how that avatar's pimped themselves up today, and this is how they're defining themselves, and it's all great. Like, that's the whole idea. And I think the challenge has been now, when you talked it before around why we're so disconnected, is that we are all just feeling like we're just individuals in this life, and we're all just working to define ourselves, and we've lost a lot of connection and community, which is the definition that sits behind it. So we're all thinking about how we all define ourselves, rather than the beauty of just thinking that we're maybe all more connected than we actually know. And then that kind of shifts people's identities. Like, I'm a barracker of this cause, rather than, you know, if, and this is going to sound a little bit over the top, but focusing and just saying, like, if we're all disconnected in one way or another, like, what's the net positive we can offer each person that comes into our life today? Whereas we all just feel like and that actually just plays it back to yourself, rather than at the moment, it just feels like everyone's over defining their avatars out there. Yeah. I know that's going to sound a bit weird and wonderful, but I love it. I just giggle. I giggle at it all.
I love it. I really relate to it. I was just having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine yesterday. We went for a walk and we've both been feeling really lonely within our wider friendship circle.
Yep.
And it's so interesting because we're doing all of the things to try to feel connected, and yet something is happening where there's just this real sense of disconnection and feeling apart from. And I still don't fully have the answer right now, Ryan, as to what that is. I feel like I'm really good at connecting with people one-to-one.
Yep.
But the minute it starts to get into these bigger groups, I start to feel like I'm lost. I start to feel like I'm isolated and I'm alone. It's that whole idea of, you can feel alone in a crowded room.
Yes.
Like it's feeling really potent for me at the moment. And it's sad because, as humans, we need each other to survive, right?
It's so true.
It's how we evolved, was in community. And yet, there's just so many things going on at the moment. And I think part of it absolutely is like finding your own place in the world, but then making sure that the foundation to that is the community around you. How have you navigated that in moving from the world of business and being this highly successful entrepreneur to stepping into the world you've now completely embodied today?
Yeah, it's work in progress, but I think, just touching on what you're saying then is that, for people listening at home at the moment, or you're walking along the beach or whatever you're doing, it's like, how honest can you be with your friends? And I think, I love dinner parties. I don't know if people at home, when you're with a bunch of great people, right, isn't that fill your cup? Like, and you leave and you just go, God, I've made some connection. But I feel like the challenge that we've got at the moment is we don't have safe places to actually be able to even express our ideas or thoughts or even opinions anymore.
Yeah.
So what happens is you start retreating more to yourself around that, and it starts to build kind of in you, and then you can probably get some confirmatory bias because you might just keep listening to the things. Whereas I feel like what we need to do is have a little bit more acceptance and create more spaces where you can just speak about ideas and concepts. And there's this kind of philosophy around constructivism, which is around that you only have an opinion or a view at this point in time. And if we have a conversation, it's an exchange where you are providing your view. I'm not defending it, but that's interesting. And it might actually shift where my thoughts are, but I'm not trying to defend it. And I feel like, what would be amazing is if we all started having dinner parties again and just creating a place where you can just say what you're thinking and what your view of the world is. And if it's politics or if it's societal issues or whatever the case may be, whereas at the moment I feel like there's this kind of pent up energy of feeling alone with your own thoughts and opinions, and you're not able to share that in a conducive way because you don't want to be judged with it. And maybe that's just playing into it a little bit. So I'm feeling like now there's, not having a profile, but being able to be a little bit more open with how you feel about the world and your thoughts around it. It's actually cathartic in its way.
100%. Yeah, because we're designed to communicate. As you were talking, I was trying to place where I am in all of that. And I totally agree with you. I think what's interesting about being in recovery is that we talk about the deep, dark, raw, real, everything, the messiness of it all. People that I speak to who are also in recovery, like, we just go there. Whereas I feel like a lot of people I encounter on a day-to-day basis don't go there. And so when you were talking about the dinner party thing, I was laughing because I actually find them really challenging because my experience most of the time when I go out for dinner is that we all sit down and we all get about 10 to 15 minutes where we talk about work,
Yep.
kids, and relationship. And it's like this tiny little snippet of each other's lives where it's like I'm not getting that, like, tell me what's really going on.
Gotcha.
That's where I think I find the disconnect in those sorts of environments. How does one combat that?
I think it's like if you go back to post 14th century, like the Renaissance period, right, out of the Dark Ages, and you used to have Renaissance dinners, right? And even in the US, even presidents used to have like the Jefferson dinners. And I know it's like, well, where is he going with this? But what it is that you need to have intent with these. So imagine bringing people together and, over entree, it's kind of getting to know each other, and then at the main, it might be like, you know what, we're just going to talk about this,
Oh, I love that.
And then you're
Having
inviting
like
people.
a topic or a theme.
A theme.
Yes.
And you might even bring someone who's really good on that. And then you say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to be it's this radical openness, right? And there's no judgment in all of it. And it's really hard because that's what society is. And I got invited to this event in Bali, actually, and it was with all these different people from around the world. And the first night, I didn't really know anybody, and it was a contrarian dinner, which basically meant that you had to stand up in front of everybody at this dinner.
How many people were at the dinner?
There's probably about 30.
Oh, my goodness.
And you had to actually say something that was against the societal norm in front of everyone. I'm like, holy shit, like either I'm going to get kicked. I'm like, this is playing into my sweet spot. But I'm just like, but you're so, let's think about that. You're so fearful of like, oh shit, everyone's going to judge me. They're going to label me this. I'm going to be, all these different things. And so anyway, I think there is a spot for being intentional. And imagine if you said like, twice a year, I'm just going to get really cool people together. And don't have to be controversial, but like we're going to chat around, like the Renaissance period was burning every social structure to the ground. And what would it be like? What would education be like? What would money be like? What would government, they're not stuff I'm going to be dinner parties, but like everything gets questioned and you pull apart, and it could just be one or two different topics, but it could be fun, right? And I think it's like we need to start talking again and being able to share our thoughts, because our thoughts could actually be misguided. But if you start to share them and someone gives you more information, it can actually shift. But if we all don't talk, we're all going to be just in our corners thinking what we think, which is not great always.
Yeah, and we're always stronger together.
We are.
Two ideas are better than one.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really curious to know, after you had that moment in your life where we'll call it rock bottom for the sake of ease, and your daughter approached you, would you mind talking to that and sharing what actually happened there? And then what was the thought process? How did you climb your way out of that darkness?
The backstory is Nella, when she was 2, was diagnosed with cancer. So she had a Wilms tumour, which was the size of like 10 centimetres by 5 centimetres in her stomach, right? And, I still remember the day really clearly. I was up at my nephew's primary school kind of graduation. I landed from Tullamarine from Brisbane, and I got this message from Rach saying, hey, when you land, just give me a call. And, she knows me so well, like she wouldn't drop anything there. And then but I knew something wasn't right. The energy wasn't right on it. So the next thing I know, I'm walking through the Royal Children's Hospital and I saw the oncology sign, and you're just like, holy shit, this doesn't happen to us. And I know that sounds, don't take that the wrong way, but it's like, it's just something that happens to other people, right? Anyway, we, 2 years through that, amazing, and it was a galvanizing experience for us. And I still think there's bits of trauma there for Rach and I, although it's interesting, it manifests in different ways, and there'll be a lot of people listening who've had similar experiences. The point of that is that, 10 years later, I'm on a dad-daughter camping trip, and I'm in a teepee. It's pissing down raining, and I'm like, oh, this is not great. It was torrential. It was in Byron Bay. And I'm like, oh,
no.
All right, this is not what I was planning. But anyway, we're in these stretcher beds, and Nell goes to me, look, Dad, can I say something? I'm like, yeah, what's up? sweetheart. And I hope I've got great relationships with my daughters. I really have invested as much as I can. I may not have been spiritually present all the time, but I was there in body. I was there at everything. And then you kind of realize there's a difference at times as well. But anyway, she said, "Dad, you're not looking that well." And she goes, "I'm kind of worried about you." And I was like, "Oh my God." And then I'm like, "I thought I was hiding this pretty well, but I haven't been." And you know what? And the reality is she was right. And the courage for her at 12 to say it, based on her experiences and Rach and I and the experiences she went through, it wasn't like the moment where, "Oh my God, I haven't been seeing it." It was probably the final straw where I was like, I'm telling everybody, I'm telling myself I'm doing it for my family, but I'm kind of not. And also, like, the universe is trying to tell me something here. I'm not on the path I'm supposed to be. I'm just not. And I knew it, and I was forecasting what we were talking about before is fear of, I'm going to let everybody down, what's going to happen, all this different stuff, and which I probably did. And then, a week or two later, I stepped down as CEO, and it was a really challenging time. I had to, I felt like I let a lot of people down. But 2 years on, it was probably the best thing that's happened to me. And I've kind of been able to come out of it, and I unashamedly do what I love to do at the moment. And that doesn't mean I have bad days. I don't have bad days. It doesn't mean still shit goes on. But the reality is I listen more than I think now. Does that give me energy? I'm a bit more observant and deliberate around what I do, and I really play into what my strengths are now. And it's a bit like when you're growing up on the plate, what do you go to first? What is the food that you like to eat? And sometimes you still have to do the grind and the shit that you don't want to do, but if that's 90% of your time, you're not here to do that. You're here to do what you should be doing the 90% of your time, and the 10% should be the grind and shit that you've got to be doing. And I've kind of flipped it now, and I feel like it's been, I'm the happiest I've ever been. But saying that, the reality of that is that's based on, I could have been happy at any time because it's only my thoughts, but the realization of that and now playing into my strengths, life's kind of with ease. Now I'm trusting more in how things are panning out for me. So I kind of straddle the middle of determinism and free will. I kind of know that I'm heading in the right direction with certainty, but I understand the choices I make each day are my choices, but there's a little bit more a sense of destiny that I know that I'll be heading the right direction where I should be, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. You mentioned earlier that meditation is part of your life now. Is that something that you were doing prior to this evolution, or is that something that you've uncovered recently, and why is it so important for you today?
Yeah, I think it's I think I always thought I was meditating, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but I kind of and still, again, anyone who's listening is like, I am working this all. Like if you had me on the podcast in a week, I could be speaking other dribble, right? So I was just pleased everyone just know that, like, it's just this is my current state of where I'm at, and I'm a lot less evolved than a lot of people. But for me, I kind of shifted a little bit. So I used to think it was all about just stilling my mind. And it's what works for everybody. It's that experiment of one. So for me, I go to Greenpoint every morning, and if anybody's running past there, they're going, "Oh, who's that guy in that bloody green four-wheel drive every morning or on the seat?" There he is again. It's like, is he weird? What's he doing? And what I do is I kind of break it into three, right? And I've got my music that I kind of listen to. And for the first 10 minutes, I try to literally just slow down the cogs and just like be a bit more intentional that I'm just not freewheeling. Because sometimes, our life's, your mind's just freewheeling. You don't even realize it's freewheeling. So it's just trying to do that. And then the second part of it, for the next part, is I actually have realized it's the skill. I mean, the beauty of life is that to listen. So I actually just spend time listening. So if we hypothesize that we are all part of a collective consciousness, it's my time to sink and maybe let wisdom attach to that wisdom and think of myself more as a vessel that could create, rather than me, again, over gripping the club. So I just listen, and it's just been a game changer. Like what comes through, and then I started reading all these books as well, Ash, around different creative people in life and people that have talk about things, and they say that creativity doesn't come from you, it comes through you. And I just kind of, it really resonated with me. So it's been quite phenomenal just to listen, and which goes back to then that curiosity through the day. And then the last part is literally visualizing how I'm going to turn up today for each of the important people in my life. And, and again, then I might walk in the door and the whole thing shits itself. But what I'm saying is I do really do that. And so I've moved then just out of my head into my heart. And I feel like the more I'm in my heart in life these days, the more ease of life is, and the more grateful that I am. And I think before, what happened is, and I think I've always been empathetic, but I've been so much in my head thinking I can think my way and control my way out of it. Whereas I've just got more in my heart now. Even in meetings, it's crazy. Like I just, it's like people don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel.
Amen.
Right? So it's kind of just connecting with people differently, and it's been really helpful for me.
And how has that shifted your external desires? Because one thing that's happened for me is the more I have been on this journey from head to heart and getting to know myself and finding those beautiful moments of peace and contentment, the less I want the stuff. That doesn't mean that I'm not still highly ambitious. I think that's something that runs through me.
Yep.
And I love that about me. I don't want to change that. But my happiness is no longer determined by the things I have, the externals. I just don't care as much. Is that been the same experience for you?
It has. It's been a real journey. I think after kind of, blowing myself up a little bit, I had these images of me just putting the gun in the holster and retiring into obscurity. Like I didn't even want to see anyone anymore. I just wanted to be anonymous, right? And then the reality is that, and I was probably straddling in myself because I was kind of working through what's ego, what's not. But the reality is I've got an insatiable hunger in life, right? And I have got ambition, but my ambition and energy is taking me towards different things. And I'm channeling that in a different way. And even in a business world at the moment, I'm more potent than I've ever been. Like I'm taking roles of chairman roles now, and I'm happy being a number 2 or a 3. I don't have to be 1
because the ego's fallen away.
And then the things that are going well for me in that world is allowing me to unashamedly be me and do what I want. So I'm kind of now understanding what I do and not want to get involved in. So I think my ambition probably in some ways is even more, which is weird, but it's not around the material things. And then it's even with money. Like, what is money, right? Money often can give you choice, but also it can be debilitating at the same time. And money is just energy. It's our association with it, right, as well. And I've got a funny association with money. Like it doesn't, I don't mean this in a way, but I'm not attached to it. But And, you know, I've come from nothing, right, really. And then, but through life, it'll appear when it needs to and not. And I've had massive exits, and then I've bloody nearly been bankrupt. Like, it's kind of, but even just my relationship with that has kind of shifted just a little bit. And it's like, again, the golf club again. Sorry, guys. I'm not over gripping, you know, on it as much anymore as well. And, but when I look at material things now, I look at them as, do these help me create moments and memories?
Yes.
So like, even, so if I just say I want a house, and it would be, oh my God, I can imagine the grandkids running around there. Oh, I can't, all my friends, and this is going to be like that's what really drives me. Or, you know, like you know, even if it's those different things for me, it's not around pimping my avatar anymore. Yeah. It's about, does this create memories and moments in this fleeting little time we've got on this crazy planet? Can I just connect with the people I love more? And, you know, and can I be of service in some specific way by utilizing that? That seems to drive me, rather than, you know, does that pimp my avatar?
Which really is all about coming back to the present moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do today to make sure that I'm living life to the fullest, however that needs to look? And I think that point about making memories with the people that you love is so much more rewarding and fulfilling than any new car, new house. Like, you know, I'm like, one of the biggest things that has been revealed to me about myself over the last 5 years in recovery is just how important travel is for me.
Yep.
And it's for that very reason.
Agree totally.
Like, just whenever I get to go away with my girlfriends or my partner or my family, you know, we just spent January in Hawaii with my family and my brother and my niece and nephew, and like, that stays with you forever. You know, that is the important stuff.
And it doesn't even, like, you know, even hotels, it's funny, like if I talk about with my kids, like what are some of their best memories, it'll be, oh, we love going down camping at Wye River. Not like, oh, we stayed at this bloody five. Well, they don't give a shit. Like they probably do a little bit more now that they're teenage daughters, but you know, like the memories around those times, like they don't give a shit about any of that type of stuff. It's like, what is the energy that we're providing kind of in that moment? And maybe, you know, when you're younger, you discount future time because you've got so much of it.
Yes.
Whereas as we're getting older, you start to value current time more because you've got less of it. So then I feel like my association with time and how I want to experience that is shifting as I'm getting older, you know, and I think as you then face potential death, which I think everyone should think about, you know, like if you're thinking you're going to die tomorrow, like would you live differently, right? And it's kind of, as you're getting older, like I'm 51, 52 this year, I'm like, Jesus Christ, in 8 years I'm 60, and I remember being 20 yesterday, and I'm still a 20-year-old trapped in a 51-year-old's body, right? And even when I'm playing sports still, I still think I am. Yeah. And I was like, oh shit, I'm not pulling up too well. But I guess the point of all of it is that, you know, we've got this finite time, and the things that you'll remember are the things, those amazing memories that you've been created along the way. And I just wanted to try and create more and more of those at the moment.
I'm all for it. That's so perfect. I have one final question for you, Ryan, that I'd love to wrap up this conversation with today. And that question is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Yeah. The 3 not negotiables for me would be, I think, ethics. And ethics are different to everybody, but for me, they're very important. Do you know, and I think Mum instilled that into me, funny enough. It's kind of like, you know, if no one's actually watching, you got to live with yourself. Do you know what I mean? And am I doing the right thing? And I think that's what karma is really. And it's not the woo-woo karma, is that if you just do that more times in life, even when things are going wrong, you know, people will be nicer to you, or these will rally around you. So I think from an ethics perspective, one of the not negotiables now also for me is around my own personal care, which is like, I'm religious around my routines in the morning now, because if this is just my avatar, I've only got this, and I'm kind of like, I just want to make sure that it's in the very best shape. So even with alcohol and all the things, I'll have occasional drink. I really thoughtful around what I eat. I exercise, not to the point of being, but I just like, you know what, I'm going to treat this body with respect, both mind and body. And then probably, you know, the last thing for me is just family now. I think it's just, they're all probably cliches, but is I'm just like fiercely protective, not protective, but I just love my family, and I just want to make sure that anything I'm kind of do is having somewhat, you know, of a net positive on them, and I'm not really prepared to sacrifice on that anymore.
Yeah, I love that. You know what? They're cliches for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story. It is an absolutely powerful one. If people want to track you down, tune into the podcast, where should they go?
Yeah, I think, maybe I'm on LinkedIn if anyone wants to kind of have a look. Just Ryan Trainor, just put that into LinkedIn. And look, I haven't, my podcast, it's been a year because I've been traveling a lot, just for funny enough with work, but not too much from away from the family, which is good. And I'm firing that up again. So if you just go to Spotify or to Apple and just do Trainable by Ryan Trainor.
Yes.
And the first season was great. Ash and your dad, Rod, was on there, which was probably one of my favorite podcasts, to be really honest. Just the authenticity of that. I've got people that have stopped me to talk just about that podcast. So even if you want to listen to one podcast, go to Trainable by Ryan Trainor and listen to Ash and our interview because it was exceptional.
Oh, amazing. I'll make sure I link that in the episode show notes. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So thank you so much for being here, Ryan.
It's been fantastic, Ash. Thank you.